More like 1 out of 1,000,000.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
As far back as like certain document leaks a few months back to most recently some photo leaks or photo dumps on social media that have shown us some iterations of Batman that are a bit more on the obscure side, and who knows of how many people within the common pop culture Batman zeitgeist that actually are aware of these iterations of Batmans will actually know the origin story. Case in point, myself. And that goes for the 1 million, DC 1 million, or Batman 1 million Batman. Funny enough, I have seen this iteration of Batman before as far as like comic panels and illustrations and fan art and such, but the most I have known about this guy is that he resides on Pluto, and he's a version of Batman, but he's not meant to be like the mainline Batman, the canonical Batman that's going on right now as far as comics. It's supposed to be like he's got his own Justice League, his own thing going on, and he just happens to be on the goddamn planet of Pluto. Like, damn, it just doesn't get much more one-off than that. I mean, I could easily pull up a Wikipedia page and kind of give you the cliff notes of exactly where his origin stories are, but at the same time, I want to remain authentic and tell you guys that I really don't know that much jack shit about Batman 1 million, apart from the fact that I've seen the suit before and thought to myself, it's got a little bit of a Black Panther kind of quality to the overall design, and I think it looks cool. You know, as Todd would say, it looks cool, and perhaps maybe that was the motivator as to why he decided to at least give us a DC Multiverse interpretation at the 7-inch scale. However, because of how much of an obscure take he is, he's not going to be as unique as a Batman 1 million. You know, he's going to be... He's not necessarily going to be a 1 in a million style of Batman. In fact, if anything, he is a pull of so many other iterations of a DC Multiverse Batman that we have seen time and time again. To kind of hammer this point across, you notice that I do in fact have one of the black bases holding him up. And that's because, if you couldn't already tell from the tooling of the legs, this is in fact utilizing different appendages and plastic from a Hush buck, specifically the legs. I recognize those bow-legged styles anywhere, and at this point, you know, I'm kind of preaching to the choir. I feel like I'm repeating myself time and time again. It's just something that I am better off accepting sooner rather than later. And so we have a predominant amount of that sculpting happening with not just the legs, but also the arms. Frankly, it's the Hush arms once more. So the majority of the tooling happening here, as far as the limbs and even a little bit of the abdominal torso piece, you'll notice it's pretty much the Hush buck. You have the wrinkles right there that are recognized, the diaper piece. So much of that is happening here. And the sooner that we get that out of the way, the quicker we'll be able to acknowledge some of the more positive aspects of Batman 1 million here. Amongst them would have to be the color scheme. From the panels that I've seen of him in the comics to now him in DC Multiverse format, I really do dig this color scheme. I really do like the matted black finish to the majority of the parts that I'm able to extrapolate from Batman Hush, but at the same time, it's not necessarily navy. I know that navy blue is a little bit on the darker side. This is a bit more brighter. It's kind of going in the direction of teal turquoise somewhat, but frankly, it clashes really well with the matted jet black finish, and then a little bit of the gold accents from the utility belt right here, which is a very straightforward, very comic-based utility belt where you have a very large square in the middle, but then you just got a lot of little rivets, circumventing around the side. But then when you get the little bronze buckle here that forms the bat ears, or rather the bat face, right here at the very top, and then that kind of stretches on over to the wings, which make up this shoulder guard piece, that then replaces what is your traditional bat symbol. Because if you notice on your mid-torso, part of the design is that there's no bat symbol, no decorative crest, nothing like that. It's just a straightforward black matted finish to the torso suit, so you really have to look a little higher to then get the majority of the bat symbol taking up this shoulder guard piece that then leads us to the cape. And that's one of the more unique aspects about the design that I genuinely did like. It's a little bit different, a little bit of a change of pace pulled from those comics. And so seeing it here in 3D format, I'm like, you know what? I'm digging it. And the actual sculpting of the plastic itself is made out of this like rubberized plastic that does flex, but it feels pretty rigid. Granted, when you kind of get a top-down view, I do think that the tooling and the way everything's kind of glued together with this shoulder guard piece, and then everything from the inside where you see a little bit of the wired fabric cape kind of tucked from within that then leads us to the neck piece, you have so much mixed media happening that it is a little abrasive of how much it changes. I do wish that maybe the plastic of the neck stretched a little farther to cover the neck, so that maybe it creates a little bit of, it covers the cape, so that then it creates a little bit of an illusion that maybe the head is part of the shoulder guard piece, even though we know that it's not, it's separated, but at least it looks a little bit more pleasant to the eye. Whereas here it's cut off a little bit too short that you can see the cape tucked right underneath right there. So you get plastic, cape, plastic. Wish that this part of the plastic was more stretched out from underneath so that, again, it just blends a little bit more comfortably to the rest of the shoulder guard right here. Even though, like I said, in the back of our heads, we know that that's not all connected. So that would have been my preference as far as how all of this was kind of costumed together and stitched together and just assembled. But at the same time, it's going to be somewhat expected since you're taking what is an awful lot of parts of pre-existing Batman and just putting it together here. Predominantly, like I said, the Hushbuck, maybe a little bit of the three Jokers as far as the actual chest plate piece right here, just sans the bat symbol because that's not catered by this. And then when you get to even a third model that it's kind of taking a little bit of inspiration from would have to be the head sculpt, which is got no mouthpiece, which makes sense since the guy's stuck in Pluto. He's probably got some kind of ventilator from within. And then on top of that, you got the whited eyes and the overall blue finish to the cowl that, in my opinion, is sculpted really well. I do like the protruding cheekbones, the eyes kind of sunken in, and the overall molding of the plastic to then look pretty badass. But at the same time, there's a reason for why I personally feel it's badass is because it's also kind of reminding me of another similar looking cowl. And that's going to be that of the Speeding Bullets Batman McFarlane figure, or in other words, Superman dressed up as Batman. And you can see right here that it's pretty much utilizing the same head sculpt right here as far as a little bit of the tooling. If anything, it's mostly using it as a foundation, and then from there they may have given him a bit more of a scowl. They kind of protruded his eyebrows a little bit, and then of course elongated the ears and changed up the color scheme. Apart from that though, it looks like at its core it's pretty much the same head sculpt from what I can tell, but everything else is arguably different. I can definitely tell that this is leaning more towards the Hushbuck as far as the Batman 1 million sculpt, but then over here with the Spitting Bullets figure, you got some different tooling happening, and frankly I also wanted an excuse to pull this guy back out because I've gone on record to say that this is, in my opinion, one of my favorite McFarlane Batmans that the Todd father was able to put out. And frankly, when we get down to the sunset months of the DC license under McFarlane Toys' umbrella, we'll have to kind of recount to see exactly where this guy will rank up, because from where I'm standing, this guy might still be ranking pretty high when we get to that point, because that's just how much I love him. And again, I need an excuse to pull him back out for this comparison, even though, like I said, they mostly just share the head sculpt and not much of anything else. Because as mentioned before, the rest of the whole body is pulled from Hush, and that sadly shares some of those negative qualities. Amongst them would have to be balancing and proper positioning, because you can see that I'm utilizing the base right here to keep him afloat, because again, he's got that bow-leggedness. The tooling around the ankles is just not suffice to put him in proper very standard basic hero poses without maybe breaking a little bit of the knees, maybe kind of inclining on the ankles a little bit, doing this and that. And so when you're dealing with not just a little bit of the weird way that the legs are assembled for that basic Hush model, but on top of that, you're also applying this fabric cape, which is your traditional nylon fabric cape with 2 wires at the end that does the job as far as assembling the overall look of Batman right here, while at the same time giving us a felt cape that is not utilizing any kind of rubber, but it's also pretty par for the course as far as material and how you're able to bend a wire. It also applies a little bit of top heaviness. So when you're dealing with a body like this that doesn't necessarily have the best footing or the best balance, it does pose a little bit of the issue, and it doesn't really make things too much better when it comes to poses, when it comes to balancing. The only thing that I think it kind of helps a little bit is that it complements the shoulder guard here at the top pretty effectively. It looks a little bit more badass. You're able to tuck a little bit of the wiring and kind of loop it or utilize the bit of the shoulder guard here for support, so it kind of looks a little bit like it's holding its own. The only downside though is that regardless of how much shoulder guard pieces or assembly you have going on right here, he still can't really wrap it around to make it look like a very imposing kind of like, you know, Keaton-esque kind of design to the cape to make it wrap around like that, like it's draping. You still have an awful lot of this happening right there. So no amount of fabrications with the cloth cape or the wiring has yet to kind of fix that issue. However, apart from not being able to drape the cape, like I said, it's stitched pretty decently. You have a little bit of the curves right here towards the bottom of the trimming. The wires do an effective job, especially when, like I said, you utilize a little bit of the shoulder guard for support. So when you do get into the articulation phase of things to be able to put them in some of those cool poses, they actually do look pretty badass, even though the majority of the points of articulation, like I mentioned before, are pretty standard when it comes to this version of Batman, since it's just utilizing the buck from the Batman Hush model. So when it comes to the head, you're able to rotate it pretty standard across the way, 360 degrees. Tilting up is pretty decent, nothing too great, and it's a little bit more on the poor side when it comes to tilting towards the bottom and kind of inclining it downwards. Side to side is pretty effective, as you can kind of see it right there. Now, naturally, one of the things that you've come to expect with a Batman that does have such a enlarged shoulder guard across the way right here is going to be some slight impedance on the shoulder articulation. And that does kind of happen a little bit when it comes to rotating the top arms. You can see right there that obviously the joints will allow it. There's no problems with the joints in and of themselves, but the shoulder guard is gonna get in the way, but it doesn't necessarily stop it. It's made out of, like I said, this flexible sort of rubberized plastic that it does move out of the way just enough to allow you to achieve that rotation pretty much across the board. So no real problems right there. And therefore, the extension off towards the sides, it's not only going to achieve 180 degrees, but even go just a notch further right about right there. And even the rubberized piece around the shoulder guard plating right here, it's pretty durable enough that it not only flexes, but it almost kind of stays in place. You kind of have to give it a bit of a press down to put it back into a much more neutral position. So I thought that was actually pretty clever. It actually feels quality. It's not the best quality, but it's better than what I was typically expecting. Similar to other Hush models that I've dealt with before, it feels like it kind of wants to nudge a little bit in terms of a butterfly joint, but it doesn't achieve as much mobility as some other Batman McFarlane figures have done. You do have the bicep swivels that do rotate 360 degrees. Two joints at the elbows, of course, fully able to bend up, though the one on my left is a little stagnant when it comes to the top joint, so I think that could have been done a little bit better. Some of the tooling feels a little bit stiff to where you are going to have to give him a little bit of a pass as far as loosening up the joints, of course, with any traditional figures. But at the same time, I'm an advocate that not all the time should the consumer have to do that. It should be ready from outside of the box, ready to go. But I digress. And frankly, while we're on the subject of that, I do feel like the wrist joints are even a little bit worse when it comes to a little bit of that stagnation. The ball joint in there is pretty reminiscent of some other Hush bucks, and ideally it moves the same way in terms of rotating the hand all the way around 360 and having the cut across the ball joint, allowing the wrist to move inwards and outwards. But I just noticed that, again, both on the left and on the right, it's a little bit on the stiff side. And when it comes to rotating the joint from the cup of the wrist, again, it's pretty stiff. I'm trying to move it by bending the wrist so that it cuts across, and I'm able to use that as leverage to move the joint from the top rather than at the bottom. And it's super, super stiff, even after passing it with a hairdryer. And at the same time, it kind of scares me that the actual peg that's pegging into the hand in and of itself is going to break off or start warping. So that's a bit of a bummer right there. Now, granted, I don't really have too much business dealing with the hands since there's not much more that you can do with the hands, but we'll talk about that when we get to accessories. When it comes to the torsos, though, it's come to be expected. Full rotation at the mid-torso cut, 360 degrees. Some slight crunching forward and back, as you can kind of see right there, and side to side. Nothing too revolutionary there. Same thing with the waist. Can fully rotate, though the diaper does feel a little bit more firm than it was from before, so you are met with a little bit of resistance. But you can still incline forward and back and side to side from the waist as well. Then the top legs can extend the leg forward about that far, right about right there, and even pretty far back towards the side, but of course do be wary of the gap that it creates here at the top. Two joints at the knees that can fully bend all the way up. Nothing too terribly new right there. And of course, naturally, like with the rest of the Hush bucks, you have, of course, the ball joint right there that I'm not the biggest fan of. That still, nevertheless, allows the foot to bend downwards and upwards, rotate all the way across from the bottom, incline and slightly pivot inwards and outwards, side to side, right about right there. And right at the front, the toes that are able to cut almost at a full 90 degrees to fully bend upwards like so. So again, nothing crazy, nothing groundbreaking as far as the articulation, but at least the color scheming makes it blend a little bit much more naturally. The tooling of the top of the cape along with the shoulder guard at least favors certain poses to make them look a bit more intimidating, a little bit more badass. But you know what would have helped a little bit more on the side of posability and getting him into some of those cool badass poses? Maybe some extra hands, because as you can kind of see right here, he only comes with one left fisted hand, and then the right one is kind of molded into this holding, pinching position. Naturally, that means that he's going to come with batarangs. But to kind of confirm the whole notion of this being pretty much the Hushbuck, only kind of retooled and repainted to then look like the Batman 1 million, the batarangs are exactly the same. They're the same ones that are included with an awful lot of those Hush molds, from the black and gray to the blue and gray to the Jim Lee version, etc. They're pretty much the same. In fact, I don't think they even changed up the color scheming. Maybe they're a little bit more on the muted side, just maybe. But apart from that, they're the exact same thing, which frankly, you know, I could have taken that. I could have accepted that, but I think what would have been a little bit better of a vote of confidence would have been some extra hands, so you get to swap them out, especially since from time to time when I'm kind of moving the wrists about, and what I was mentioning before about how I was feeling like the peg was warping or at risk of breaking, I thought to myself, well, at the same time, maybe I shouldn't push it too far, since there's no incentive to swap out the hands, because they feel like they can. But why would I if there's no extra hands included? That's really about it, what's included inside of the box. Sure, you get the added fabric cape, the wiring, and a much more unique take on the Caped Crusader from one of the more obscure illustrations that we've gotten thus far. But at the same time, again, if it's just taking pre-existing figures and just barely changing a little bit of what, you know, we've come to expect, and then calling it, yo, that's Batman 1 million, then sure, you know, it's a decent checkbox to fill in for completionists, but does it warrant picking up, especially after the most recent breaking of news when it comes to price increases, the economy, and just completely the shitter, and just making us prioritize of what we really want to spend money on, especially when it comes to those increments, and trying to gauge when we start getting that feeling in our stomachs like, are we pulling the same figure out of the box? I already had to go through those hoops when it came to Marvel Legends. I don't really want to start feeling it with McFarlane Toys, especially on what is alleged to be the final year of McFarlane Toys holding the DC license. From afar, this guy looks pretty cool, but once you start moving him about and kind of dealing with, again, the batarangs and then the curmudgeon of this whole deal with balancing issues, especially since it's just taking the problems when it came to poses and balancing from the Hushbuck, and I have to deal with this black base once more, it kind of puts things into perspective as to whether or not this is a warranted pickup. And therefore, I'm going to be giving the Batman 1 million figure here a 6 out of 10. It's okay, it's inoffensive, but going forward, we are going to have to start getting a little pick and choosy and deciding which Batman truly feels like 1 in a million. However, if you guys still want to pick them up, there are going to be affiliate links in the description down below if you guys are interested. And while you're down there, go to the comment section and let me know what you guys think of this overall design for the Batman 1 million iteration. Does he warrant a DC Multiverse figure, or are you guys cool just checking out the concept art or the panels from the comics and just calling it at that, and you guys can easily just bypass this guy for now? I'm interested to see what you guys have to say, and if you guys enjoyed the review enough, hit the thumbs up button while you're down there. Hit the thumbs down if you did not, and as always, take care and stay humble. Peace.